Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Layer by Layer, the show about 3D printing and our place inside the industry. Today we're going to talk about desktop metal, a little bit about Apple's 3D printing projects, as well as how we have started printing with $1,000 per kilogram filament. And we're going to top it all off with an awesome interview with Travis over at Shop Nation. So a lot of good stuff in this show, but before we do that, let's go ahead and pay the bills. This episode is brought to you by Tangled Filament at tangledfilament.com. Tangled is our attempt to reduce the cost per kilogram of filament down to $10 per kilo. We started out at 22, we're currently sitting at 15 and working to get it down even lower. It is a standard PLA, and you can have any color you want so long as it's black. So go ahead and check out tangledfilament.com and get your $15 filament today and help us get it down to 10. So yeah, we'll a little bit more on Tangled coming up later in the show, but going into news. First of all, Desktop Metal has done a reverse stock split, a 4-for-1, or a 1-for-4. Yeah, 4-for-1. There we go. This has kind of been a long time coming. They've been trading fairly low, so they're doing a reverse stock split just to basically clean up the books and stay in good standing with the New York Stock Exchange. At the time this was announced, it was June 10th when they announced this or executed on it. And yeah, they were at the new combined value on the 11th. Currently, Desktop Metal has a valuation of $137 million. For those of you all keeping track throughout this saga, which we have had intermittent updates about once a month on Desktop Metal throughout the whole lifespan of this podcast, they used to be worth $1 to $2 billion. I think at their peak they were at about $2. Right now, they're in the same kind of position as a lot of 3D printing companies, which is just not a very good one. They've been spending lots of money and they haven't hit profitability, and 3D printing is no longer in vogue. A lot of companies taking a huge hit on this. Shapeways, which is really kind of in our business. Shapeways also did a reverse stock split, I think. No, they didn't do a reverse stock. No, they did. No. Desktop Metal did the reverse stock split, and then the stock kept on dropping again. Shapeways has recently announced that they were splitting off their software assets into a new private company, which is a move that shows that the company's kind of in trouble and they're trying to separate the crown jewels from the rest of it before it all goes down. That's kind of what it looks like from the outside. But since that happened, their stock has dropped by half because, to be fair, they effectively took half the company and shoved it off out of the company. So right now, Shapeways, which used to be a darling of 3D printing also back in the day, and I think when they went public, they were at over $100 million. Right now, they're valued at $6 million, $6 to $7 million. So yes, it's been brutal for all of the publicly traded companies the last couple of years, ever since the startup bubble fell out a year or so ago. But anyhow, Apple using 3D printing to produce their Apple Watches. New smartwatches from Apple will include metal 3D printed components. A report from TF International Securities analyst Ming-Chi Kuo indicates the U.S.-based technology giant will reportedly include parts 3D printed by Chinese 3D printer manufacturer Bright Laser Technologies in its Apple Watch Series 10. Follows news last year was Apple was testing BinderJet 3D printers from BLT to produce its Apple Watch Series 9. The new report indicates that BLT has now joined Apple's component supply chain, directly producing end-use parts for the company. This is a big deal because the Apple Watch is not a small-run product. This is a very proof-positive example of using 3D printing to produce an end-use product. And there aren't a lot of those examples out there, and certainly not as public as what Apple is. The new Apple Watch will feature a larger screen and a thinner design than its predecessors. The upcoming Apple Watch Ultra 3 specifications are expected to remain roughly the same, though new... In July, that he adopted 3D printers to support the production of Apple Watch Ultra 2, launched that September. In 2023, he explained that the 3D printed mechanical parts still require CNC post-processing, but improved production times and reduced costs. Yeah, If you can 3D print the part, you can radically reduce the weight, material use, all the things over conventional CNC machining. Because like for number one, these very fine parts, if you're using traditional machining, you start getting into the challenge of just having a rotary tool or whatever kind of stamp they might have used, either not being able to produce it because it'll just tear out the part or something else. So when you get these really fine kind of parts, printing can really create a big advantage where you can still have minimal material all the way through and not have to worry about damaging the part from the manufacturing process itself. So imagine like in tooling, you have a spinning spindle on the end of some CNC mill. If you get too thin, that spindle basically tears out the part like it's cloth wrapped around a thing. So being able to print these parts let them make them even more refined. These components are usually produced by forging bricks of material into smaller metal blocks, which are then milled to the correct size and design. The company is printing the watch chassis to reduce material usage. But it appears that it's the main watch chassis, not like some interior little spring or something like that, but the full thing. And then they'll basically, this sounds as if they will print the full watch chassis and then polish the outside with machining or other processes, and then the interior can be basically standard 3D printed. But they can also get the advantages of like embedding heat sinks and all kinds of nifty little features into it that were unmachinable before. It's not surprising that Apple is using this kind of stuff, and 3D printed components are being used by a lot of companies in very big ways, but this is a really nice big public one. So a lot of fun with that. All right. Company announcements. So, Tangled update. So, with Tangled, all black right now. Thank you, everyone who ordered orange last week. We sold out pretty quickly. Here's the thing. With Tangled, colors are a problem because colors create more variation, and when you create more variation, you increase cost because you end up splitting your time and resources across multiple different SKUs, and you end up hurting it. And Tangled, it's all about the cost. It's entirely about the cost. So colors are not going to become necessarily a continuous thing. We are working on getting back on master plan and getting white and gray out. For those, effectively, we want a secondary extruder started up so that we don't have transition filaments as drastic as what we have right now, going from black to any other color. Black continues to appear in that color for a decent amount of time to where it's quite expensive to change colors. And you will say, oh, Gabe, well, sell us the transition filament. We'll just print it for whatever stuff that we're painting. And that's all well and good. Excuse me. But by using transition filament, we have to sell it at a reduced price. And yeah, we sell at break even, but I don't want to sell at a loss. And whenever you have waste that you're selling at worse than break even or at a loss, it's just waste, which then turns into pricing barriers for the other stuff. So long as we are keeping the bulk of it in light black, that creates a more efficient system to where we can continue reducing costs. Once we hit that $10 per kg, and that's all in a good spot, then you can add in a SKU. Now, the other flip side of this is that we move more volume if we have more colors around. This is what every filament manufacturer does. I think that model's wrong. Every filament manufacturer mainly sells black. And even though you guys proved me wrong and bought all the orange, it doesn't mean that that is a sustainable thing to where we need to keep workflow in it in place. Because I know that every other filament manufacturer is mainly making black. It's like over 50% for almost every filament maker. Everybody uses black and light gray and then white. That's the reason we picked those three colors. They are statistically the highest use colors. Now, that's all reasoning for that stuff. We're not going to start introducing colors. So all you filament manufacturers who are worried about us coming in and just reaming you, don't. Colors are your competitive advantage. Keep on doing it. I think colors are the special sauce you can do in it. I want to continue to do it for very long because I would imagine somebody else can come and take our model and go and make blue and white or whatever else it was and keep on going there. So you might want a little more special sauce than that, but on you. Okay. Now, going to, with Tangled though, announcements about cool stuff. Spooless. We got the machine. We ordered the machine. The machine is coming. Where we're going to start testing Spooless. This is not something that a lot of people are writing blogs about how to do Spooless, because quite frankly, no one in the States really does Spooless, or at least doesn't do it very well. And secondarily, it's just the ones who do know how to do it, frankly, Chinese manufacturers, don't have a lot of YouTube videos about how it's done or where they got their machine or any of the rest of it. Extrusion is fairly easy to learn to a degree. I have a beginner's level knowledge of extrusion. Like, I understand it get hot, we push pellet through, filament come out end. That's about my level of understanding of extrusion. We're working on refining that. We're working on the material science a little bit more to start refining our materials. Because in case you guys didn't know either, our PLA is PLA. It's not PLA Plus, it's not PLA Pro, it's not some other brand name, it's PLA. Pure virgin PLA, which means that it's not high speed. High speed filament, actually we need to talk about this in another video one of these days, but high speed filament has a number of tricks in it and a number of shenanigans in it that make it high speed, but mess with it in a number of different ways in the resulting part. But if you're making a consumer product, it doesn't matter. If you're trying to make an engineered product, it does matter. Anyhow. But yeah, Spooless is coming. It'll probably be 6 to 8 weeks before we even start really ramping up any sort of production with it, once we verify that we're doing it well. Quite frankly, oh, by the way, request to the swarm out there, the wisdom of the crowd. If you can tell us where to source cardboard tubes that are already 3 inches long so that we don't end up having to cut our own, that would be fantastic. So thank you. That is necessary for Spooless. We are not going to do coreless Spooless stuff. They will have a core. And we'll redo either the slant spool or create a whole new spool again and go from there. But yeah, Spooless will become a thing, and it will become the default. 1 kg spools, once we introduce Spooless, 1 kg spooled filament will become more expensive compared to the Spooless once we get that ramped, because we just bought a whole bunch of spools and we ain't going to do that again. Nope, we're done. They have created so much hassle because I am tired of faxing purchase orders to the spool manufacturers. I don't want the workflow. It's too much effort. We're just going to kill spools entirely. That all being said, I have just preached a lot about efficiency and cost and all the rest of it. Here is something completely opposite to that. Tangled is a solved problem. We know mathematically that we can get to a certain point as we hit certain roadmaps. It's just an execution challenge at this point, but there's not unknowns. And it's really not fun when there's no unknowns and there's nothing to try. It's like, oh, we're gonna make filament and tomorrow we're gonna make some more filament. Whoopity-doo. So in order to make Tangled a little bit more fun again, we've always been a little bit plucky about the whole thing and not really given enough about any part of it, because if it happened, it happened. If not, no skin off our nose, because we're going to use all the stuff anyway. But with Tangled, we want to keep on kind of having fun with it. So one of the first parts of that is you're going to start receiving stuff in your Tangled spools. When you open them up, there will be a present inside. It's going to be a modern Cracker Jack. Why? Gabe, it adds 5 or 10 cents to the cost of the spool, and nickels and dimes count. That's right, they do. But if the whole thing of Tangled is scale to where we got to make thousands and thousands of spools to keep on dropping the cost drops down to pennies for this little thing to be put in, and it's way more fun, guys. Because like, I open up a spool of filament, and it's a job. It's a stupid thing to have to wrap off the vacuum sealing. People are using too much filament to where we want to have a little bit more fun with it. And also just thinking of the thing to put in the spool each month is kind of fun. So yeah, starting here over the next couple weeks or so, we've started implementing this program. So you should start finding some goodies in your spool in addition to the filament itself. So be looking for those. Hope you enjoy. Let us know what you think. Tag us on Instagram, the things. Do really let us know what you think. But it's kind of a fun thing to do that we get to just do. So yeah, let us know. But those will be coming down, and it's going to be fun because it's something else to do with Tangled, because we're just making filament right now. and waiting for machinery to show up. And while we're waiting for machinery to show up, I'd rather do something else. Okay, API update and Etsy update. So this is fun. And this is actually, that segues really well from the Tangled thing. It's really fun. We've hit a point. It's cool to do cool things. So you can now 3D print lunar dust through the API and therefore through the Etsy app. By this point, it should have been released. If not, I'm sorry, I announced it early and it's not available, but it's coming soon if for some reason it's been held up. But we have made available lunar simulant filament on the API and the Etsy app. Now, here's the catch. This filament costs $1,000 a kilogram. It's not cheap. It's not cheap, but it is available. And we think this is really fun because now it makes it more accessible. You can't, rather than having to buy a whole spool, you get to buy just your part that you want. But it's also just really nifty because we get to say that our API prints lunar dust right now, which it does. So that is available right now. In addition to that, and kind of tangential to that, that some people might think is more practical, but we're printing moon rocks. We get to print moon rocks. We get to print moon rocks. But if you don't want the moon rocks, we have also introduced the fire colors to the API, and there go for the Etsy app. Yellow and red are now available for printing. There will be more colors in the future, but these are the first release. So if you've had a product that you have wanted to put onto our Etsy integration that you haven't been able to do because we've limited you in colors, we are now introducing colors. So you now have black, gray, white, and red and yellow, and lunar dust, because we can, and it's cool. The lunar dust basalt filament, we're actually doing in partnership with Virtual Foundry. And if you want to get some of your filament yourself, if you're experimenting, and then you want to scale up production with our print farm, you can get a little bit of it from them. But the lunar regolith filament costs $1,000 a kilogram. It's actually like $850, but might as well be $1,000. It's literally like $1 per gram for this filament. It's absurdly expensive, but it's so cool because it is actual regolith simulant that like NASA uses to experiment with rovers and that kind of thing that you can now print with. So yeah. And if you really want to, the reason it was created was for basically testing construction methods with and 3D printing with moon in situ materials. So that's why it exists. If it'd be really sweet if NASA wanted to plug into our API to get a whole bunch of 3D printed moon rock parts, that'd be sick. But aside from that, anybody else who wants, it's fun to go over and just like see pricing for this. So you should just like log into the Etsy app just to see what it is, because it's really funny to see. And if you're any of the API developers, you can call it and see what's available there, and just see how it goes. It's expensive. $1,000 a kilogram, $500 a pound. Oh, it's bananas, but it's so cool. All right, going into this next part. Welcome to the interview portion of the podcast. We've been working to do these for a little bit. You may have seen our past interview with Paul Powers, but this week we got to talk to Travis at Shop Nation. And Travis, I've watched Travis, his channel for almost 4 years personally myself, because I was into woodworking before he got into 3D printing. But Travis is probably one of the larger print farm voices on YouTube. The Shop Nation itself focuses on producing parts for wood shops, and his main product line are dust collectors for different types of saws, like chop saws and that kind of thing. And I wanted to talk to him because he's one of the few who has started scaling up a print farm, and specifically a print farm that's not like custom made, but actually using the print farm to enable the creation of a product rather than doing print farm as a service or some other model. So it was fun to talk to him both about that business model, the challenges he's run into in the print farm, how he came to be in it, and then we also got to discuss actually YouTube creation and video production and the marketing of it a little bit there, because he's also one of the very early adopters of, I would say, YouTube content marketing for products, where he's learned how to leverage it and use it in an intelligent way. Talking to Travis about how he picks his products and then how he releases his products and how he knows when to do a new SKU, there were some interesting insights in that about how to do it intelligently. But overall, it was a really fun conversation. The stuff that he's been doing over there has been great, and he is a complimentary voice to us. So if you're looking at creating 3D printed products, especially if you're looking to sell them yourself, we talk about 3D printed products in the context of manufacturing. Like, do you want to make 10,000 of these? This is how you do it. But he comes at it from the perspective of like, okay, you want to build a print farm and a printer business. Here are things to be aware of. So it's a different version of the same type of problem, and he's done it very successfully. Shop Nation, he has about 350 to 400,000 subscribers. It's in the in-betweener there. And he's just recently released a second channel, Print Farm Academy, where he's talking about how to build up print farms and build up this print farm business in a smart sort of way. So it was a great conversation. Hope you all enjoy it. I'll stop talking now, and you can just enjoy the rest of the conversation.
So, Travis, how did you end up doing this? When you're now a big old 3D printing YouTuber with a couple of channels, what is it that got you onto that path, and what were the things that you'd done before there for a bit?
Yeah, good question. It's been a long journey. It's been 7+ years in the making, really. So if I go back to how I got into 3D printing at all, my background's engineering, so I have a degree in mechanical engineering. I was working for like a large company, petrochemical company, and an opportunity popped up to start sort of an additive group within that company. We did a lot of like traditional, like, we had things sent to machine shops, and 3D printing represented a way to kind of more quickly solve problems, especially around the robotics that we use for inspections. So I was tasked with finding a 3D printer suitable enough to use in an industrial environment, like a petrochemical plant. So I did some research, and at this point, I really knew nothing about 3D printing. In college, I'd been exposed to it. I kind of knew a little bit about it, but I'd never touched one. I'd never used one, nothing. So I kind of went down the rabbit hole, as it were, as probably most people watching this know that it very much is a rabbit hole of 3D printing. And I found a company called Markforged at the time, which was like this little startup. And their whole thing was there were a fused deposition modeling based technology, but they used continuous carbon fiber strands in their parts. So they were like really, really strong. And they were also out of like a nylon composite. So from a durability and strength standpoint, that kind of checked the boxes for what we were looking for. So convinced my boss to buy one of their small little desktop units at the time, put it to use. And like with the first project we used with it, we saved like $6-figure dollars. And like, that's when the like light bulb went off my head. I'm like, holy crap. There's really something.
With that project, was that end of arm tooling?
No, it wasn't actually. It was, so what it was is in large like chemical plants, refineries, all that kind of stuff, they use little robots to do inspections so they don't have to send people into equipment to do the inspections. So you've got just like, tiny little crawler with like magnetic tracks, and it rides up the walls of these vessels. Turns out we needed a way to like retrofit a certain sensor or a light in a certain configuration. And historically, you would, draw something up in CAD, get something machined out of aluminum, wait a week or two, get it, that whole song and dance. 3D printing, you could do it overnight. So that was like, because we could react so much faster, it caused less downtime, and downtime in a big plant is like big dollars. So we were able to avoid a lot of money. But moving forward from there, I like had so much fun with 3D printing that I grew this additive group from one printer to start, and by the time we left, we had 10. And we were doing multi-site, actually global. We were sending them around the world, and it was like this like huge like win. So I didn't know it at the time, but I was a pretty big customer of Markforged at that time. A little startup having this big chemical company using their products and kind of showcasing them. They invited me to speak at one of their events, and so I came and spoke as a customer, kind of showing success stories and all that. and got to hang out with a lot of the engineers and the people sort of behind the scenes, and thought, okay, maybe it'd be pretty fun to go work for them. So jumped ship and worked for them as an application engineer. So took everything I knew about industry and applying sort of 3D printing to real world problems and did it for them on the road. So spent a bunch of time going to all these like Fortune 500 manufacturers, walking their lines. And as you mentioned, end of arm tooling is like a huge application. And just everything in between, like jigs, fixtures, all that kind of stuff. Anything to make manufacturing faster, we used as much as you can 3D printing for. So did that for a couple of years, had a lot of fun, then kind of took a detour into the CNC world. So still like the common thread between everything I do is manufacturing. I just really like love that world. And then sort of in parallel with starting to work at Mark Forge, that's when I launched my YouTube channel, Shop Nation. That's the bigger YouTube channel that I run. So 3D printing was still very much like kind of a hobby. I was doing it, quote unquote, professionally, but it was still just a hobby. I had one little Prusa, in my office that I'd play around with. And I was starting to tinker with ideas on how to like productize ideas that I've had, that I've come up with on my channel to the 3D printer that I have in my office. So I started like slowly selling products and sort of developing things that other people would find useful, and just like translating everything I was doing in like big industrial world down to like my world with YouTube. And then over the next couple of years, it kind of grew. I eventually went full time with YouTube after a couple of years.
What was the year you started your YouTube, and what was the year that you went full time?
I started YouTube in 2017, and then I went full time in 2022. So it'll be almost 2 years in July that I went full time.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. So it's like, it was a long process. That's a question I get all the time. Like, if I start YouTube, can I start doing this full time tomorrow? I'm like, no, it's going to take a while. You got to figure it out, like anything. But yeah, so like I just started really selling products made via 3D printing because it was a convenient technology. And as I got more and more into 3D printing, I started sharing more and more on the Shop Nation channel, which historically is just like a DIY, like woodworking type channel. That's like the majority of my audience. So 3D printing, at least in the early stages when I started to sprinkle in some 3D printing content, it really didn't get a whole lot of traction because it's not really what my audience was looking for. But as I started getting a little bit bigger and reaching more and more people, as I started doing more and more 3D printing content, it started getting more popular. So recently, about a month and a couple of days ago, I launched a second channel called Print Farm Academy, which is like just specializing in 3D printing, specifically the business of 3D printing.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that a little bit more here a little bit later on. Going all the way back to when you were at Dow and you were first kind of exploring 3D printing for those guys, you mentioned that, traditionally they would go and have the part machined and sent on out. Dow's a pretty big company. Why is it so much easier for them to set up a printer than to set up a larger machine shop? When, a $5,000 machine doesn't appear that much different really from a $100,000 machine. Even, I know it's expensive, but still, versus the traditional versus the unknown.
It's a great question, and it's something I used to scratch my head about all the time. Big companies, for those of you who have worked for big companies, they tend to think of solving problems in much different ways than you or I would normally. Because I agree, they could easily set up a machine shop within their facility and sort of like use that as a central repository. But what big companies do is they realize that they're not in the business of making parts, even though it would probably make economical and business sense to do so. They consolidate everything to outsourcing. At least that's what Dow was doing at the time. Dow used to have huge machine shops at every one of their sites. But over time, there was probably some Six Sigma project that proved that it was a waste of time and money, and they got rid of them. So what that does is it makes you, from a business standpoint, it makes you more focused on what you should be doing. But it also like leaves you susceptible to having these interruptions, which could be solved with 3D printing. So I totally agree. Like there were plenty of problems we were solving with 3D printing that did not need to be solved with 3D printing. It happened to be the resource that they had.
Okay, so it was a quick and lean way to get back in there after the entire capacity just disappeared. The shop wasn't backlogged and they were trying to find another way to expand it. It just didn't exist at all.
Yeah, they relied on local partners, like local machine shops, and they were always, overloaded with work anyways. So it was a capacity problem that they didn't want to solve internally.
I have a question for you, Travis, because you've been starting a business. Generally, when you're starting a business and you get more demand than what you want or what you can sustain, try to grow to take on that new stuff. Where do you draw the line to where you say, oh, Dow wants a ton more from me, I'm not going to do it just because I don't want to add another machine? What do you think the rationale is in that context? Because I don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't either, to be honest. It's just a pain threshold. Like if it gets painful enough, they'll solve it with money.
Well, that's true.
But yeah, it's a great question. Or like instead of, if I were to be a true like steward of the money that I was given to do this additive program, could it have been better served by just leveraging external partners for 3D printing? Because it's going to be a lot faster than a machine shop. It's going to be longer than having a machine sitting at my desk, but not by that much longer.
But it's not even. It's not the allocation of the resources there. It's like the machine shops themselves are overloaded. Why do you think that those machine shop operators don't just expand themselves when they have effectively this unlimited demand behind them? From the entrepreneurial perspective, where do you think like the hunger stops, or what the thought process there is? That's enough. I don't want any more work now. They're going to have to go somewhere else. That kind of idea. How do you rectify that in your place? Because you're getting to a place where you're growing big now too.
Yeah.
So where do you draw the line?
I think the constraint a lot of times is people. I don't think it's necessarily capital or machines. I think that they have, especially in like if we're talking about chemical plants, they're usually in places that don't have a ton of like population around them. So maybe they're pulling from a small pool of like trained operators that are available in this area. Maybe they've only got a couple that they really trust, and you could throw as many machines as you want, but if they're not being tended or operated by someone who knows what they're doing, you're not getting it out of it. So I know for me, that was part of the reason I've like stifled my growth for a while, was because of labor. I was trying to do it all myself, which, as we all know, is like a running off a cliff, right? So until I got help and now have like expanded that help, now I have like the breathing room to add more machines and add more capacity. So I don't know. I think probably more so than not, it's probably people rather than capital or equipment.
When you've been hiring for your print farm and operations in general, have you been hiring people who have previous print experience, or somebody just totally new who's competent?
Yeah, good question. I used to think that it had to be someone that was very well versed in like the 3D printing world. I don't think so as much anymore. And there's like a big reason why. The biggest reason is because like I've figured out a way, or at least I think I figured out a way to do it really efficiently and have a very like specific way I want it done. If you bring someone in that has 3D printing experience, they're going to bring their own ways of doing things or their own habits or, whatever it is. So it's almost like I'd rather just bring someone in that is willing to learn and work and learn the system that I've kind of built and then can kind of run in that. Also, like for the work that I do, a lot of the labor I need isn't actually physically tending the print farm. It's all of the prep and fulfillment and stuff sort of on the back end. So it's not specialty at all. It's just kind of, rinse and repeat type work. So like eventually when I do hire like a full-time true like print farm manager, I think it's going to be a mix of like willingness to learn, technical aptitude, but not necessarily like expertise in 3D printing.
That's fair. So when did it click for you? Because you were assigned the job for Dow, and you're like, okay, we're going to start building printers, and this is pretty handy, but machining's still pretty good. When did you become the true believer, or did you ever? Some of us are still on the fence about this whole thing.
So that's a good question. It wasn't immediately, because like my background has always been like traditional stuff, right? Like casting and welding and injection molding and all that kind of stuff. So like I definitely saw the limitations with 3D printing, but it's funny because I kind of like became a 3D printing evangelist within the company. So I was almost tasked with selling the technology to people to get them to use it, because most people, especially the people that are, getting the type of work done that I was talking about, they're used to doing things a certain way and they don't really want to entertain anything new. So it caused me to have to go into like selling mode about like, well, okay, here's the benefits, here's the pros and cons of doing it this way, here's what we can gain with additive, I know you're limited on maybe that geometry with this, but with additive, now all of a sudden the geometry is basically free. So I think once I realized that, like, maybe realize is the wrong word. Once I started getting into that mindset of like having to highlight why additive makes a lot more sense in some situations than others, I think that's when it really clicked for me. Like, I was never like full on like we should 3D print everything, because to this day, that is not the right answer, right? There's lots of things. Just because you can 3D print them doesn't mean you should. But I think there's a tremendous number of opportunities that you can 3D print, or products, or widgets, whatever it is, that I think a lot of people just don't know about. They don't, because they're thinking in that, like, if you learn a certain way, if you learn to design for machining, everything you conceptualize in your head is going to be basically back engineered from wanting to machine it, right? So whereas if you start with additive, everything you think about additive could be 3D printed, or whether it's powder or SLA or FDM, whatever it is. So I just saw it as like a cool new opportunity or application to make stuff, and that was exciting. Like, making stuff has always been like something I've always enjoyed doing, and so being able to teach other people about how another way you can make that thing was exciting for me.
I do want to reemphasize that point a little bit, though, too, for everybody. The fact that one of the biggest hurdles for printing is, yes, the education of how to actually use printing in a functional engineering type way. Because what everybody is using right now is they're taking all of their expertise with molding and machining, designing for those processes, and then seeing the 3D printed result and saying, it's garbage, which is not a fair evaluation of the process.
Right.
But yeah, you never want to be in an industry where you have to re-educate a generation, which is exactly kind of what we're all in here. So it's a terrible situation, but the one that has to be dealt with. When you went over Markforged and were working with them for a bit, when was that? That was about the same time that you were starting to work with Shop Nation, correct? Did I get the timing right? Or
Yep.
A little bit later?
Yep. Okay. It was just after, but basically the same time.
So yeah, Shop Nation, like I said, was mainly focused on woodworking. When at Markforged, or when was the transition where you're like, 3D printing is implementable into your content in a way that's useful? You did the test videos and there was hit or miss, but like, when did it spark as being useful?
So I always knew in the back of my head that there was like a lot of applications. Like, I thought everyone who does woodworking should have a 3D printer. And like I wrestled with that idea, like how to tell that to somebody without it kind of brought me back to the whole like selling 3D printing thing. Like, I just knew how valuable having a little 3D printer in a shop environment was, because if I need a quick little, jig to hold something in a certain position, or if I need to like accurately lay out some holes or anything, like, it's just so easy to do with a 3D printer. And I knew that power was like not quite understood by a lot of people, especially in the woodworking community. So it was always there. I never knew about a way to like truly showcase it in a way that wasn't like, I don't know, in a way that I knew that was actually going to be absorbed and stick with my audience. So I think it started with the first product I started selling was this little stop block, which is a tool used by woodworkers. So I did a video showing, kind of what it does and sort of why it's designed the way it is, and the fact that it's 3D printed. And that, I think that at least started a conversation with a lot of people about what 3D printing meant specific to a wood shop. And then it just kind of went from there. I started developing more and more things specific for the wood shop. And now it's funny, like additive, like since going back to like 2008, like MakerBot days, it's kind of gone through these hills and valleys of popularity and like surge and hyperbolic, statements, that kind of stuff. Like everyone's going to have one in their house. Everyone, you're never going to go to the hardware store.
Well, that was a dumb idea from the very start.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like, it was like, yeah, exactly. So like during the entire time I did Shop Nation, it's similar, kind of like 3D printing maybe wasn't as top of mind for a lot of people at the very beginning of that. But now fast forward, 5-6 years, 3D printing, I think, has become a lot more approachable to a lot more people. So I think more people are just paying attention to it in general. I get messages all the time of woodworkers who say, I just got my first 3D printer and it's awesome. I'm printing all kinds of stuff for my shop. So I think more and more people are sort of catching on. I think my initial idea to push it in the woodworking world was maybe a bit premature. I had to kind of wait for the market to kind of catch up, which I think it did in the last couple of years.
Was that a COVID result of like more hobbyists getting into it, or was it just you'd been around long enough that you finally hit critical mass?
I think it was three things. I think my channel was getting big enough where I was reaching people outside of my immediate audience, which, as we know, people that do YouTube, when your videos start sort of getting some traction, you start reaching other audiences, right? Beyond, for me, woodworking, which is like mid-40s men. so I was starting to reach other people.
Crazy, right?
Beyond that, yeah. And so I think it was that, like the channel was getting big enough where I was reaching other people. I think COVID was a big contributor. Everyone was sitting around twiddling their thumbs, wondering what they could do. And then three, I think probably in the last 3 years, I think there's been like a true like surge of low cost, actual good hobby level 3D printers starting to hit the market. Because before, there's always been like the Enders and like the lower budget stuff. But in my opinion, I think those frustrate more people than they help. Now you can buy a low-cost 3D printer that just works out of the box. And that's going to keep more people engaged and more people interested in the hobby who maybe don't want to tinker with like dials and knobs and temperatures and speeds and all that kind of stuff and just want to use it to solve problems.
Oh, it's amazing how much the industry never cared about reliability, even the ones who said they cared about reliability.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, the best printer 3 years ago was still a hobby machine and a DIY job that you were expecting, but it was the most reliable. And now I think that was partially driven by the industry itself because, to be blunt, and apologies to everybody watching, the 3D printing industry is flipping. The 3D printing community is very toxic to newcomers, especially if you don't know how to do it.
Right.
And the company that we're both referring to, Bamboo Labs, that kind of flipped this all on its head, while they listen to that core audience who are the early adopters, they also realize that that's not who they're selling to. That's who they got to talk to.
Yep.
But it's everybody else who never had a printer before, and they're trying to sell the first printer out. Yep. I still don't think they're pushing on the idea. I appreciate Bamboo Labs is a fantastic company in all kinds of different ways, but their marketing needle threading that they've done with it, as far as presenting it as interesting to a normal person, while also still maintaining the 3D printing DNA of like building, creating stuff, it's just a fantastic piece of execution.
Yeah.
But anyhow, for you as an engineer moving into YouTube, that's not generally a typical choice or career direction to move into. So what was the artistic thread that made you want to go start making videos? And really well-structured videos, by the way. You have excellent time. Do you still do your editing, or have you outsourced any of that stuff?
I still do all my editing like an idiot, yes.
See, that's even more, well, so does Mark Grover. That's fine. But yeah, what stuck that for you? What made you want to do YouTube? What got you into it?
I've always enjoyed creative things. Like, even though engineers and creativity don't always go hand in hand.
Right.
Like, creating stuff has always been something I enjoyed. And even going back well before YouTube stuff, I'd mess around with little cheap drones I had and make, stitch together little simple videos that are hilarious to watch now. But I think there's always been something in me that enjoyed creating stuff, and maybe video is a tangible way to exercise that creative desire. So yeah, when I started YouTube, it's funny. I didn't have a camera. I just filmed on my phone, a lot of people should start.
Yes.
I had this the whole premise of my channel was we had just moved into this house. I had a separate 1-car bay of our garage that I had earmarked for me, because I always wanted to build my a shop, just to build stuff and tinker in. And I said, okay, I've got this blank slate, essentially. What if I just documented the process of building it out? Because when I went on YouTube, I was searching for content about people building out their shops and how they laid it out and how they organized it. Maybe it was niche at the time, but it seemed like all the big YouTubers at the time just would touch on it occasionally, but their channel was focused on something else. So I decided to focus my entire channel on that and document my sort of journey in doing it. And I set myself a goal. I said, I'm going to make 10 videos and we're just going to see how it goes after that. Like for anyone that wants to start YouTube or social media or anything, like your first couple videos are going to be hot garbage. It's just gonna, I don't care if you come from like editing background, like it's still going to be bad. So I just kind of like, I knew that without knowing that at the time. Like that's why I said I gave myself that 10 video goal, right? Like get through 10. If there's any little spark, then we'll keep going. If it's a total disaster, then we'll just, we'll pull out and cut our losses. So oddly enough, by that 10th video, like I started getting like a tiny bit of traction. That was enough to keep me going. But I certainly didn't start it to do it full time. Like even 4 years into it, if you asked me if I want to do it full time, I would have said no. I had no interest in doing it full time. So I didn't start it with the aspirations of making money or going full time or anything like that. I just wanted to make content about stuff that I thought was missing from YouTube. That's kind of the whole thing.
That's fair. What was like the spark of those first 10 that gave you enough traction to say this is worth continuing?
That's a good question. I don't even remember, to be honest. I think like I just started seeing like an uptick of subscribers beyond people that I knew.
That's fair.
We all get the easy subscribers, hey, mom, dad, subscribe, whatever.
Yeah.
I started getting like random people, and then I'd get like the same people on videos comment. I'm like, oh, okay, so these people are like watching this idiot on YouTube do these things. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm onto something. And it certainly wasn't like, it wasn't like I went to like 100,000 subs, and that for me was like, okay, I get it, I should do it. I mean, it was probably 300 subs or something. I don't even know what it was at the time, but it was just like some little amount of traction where I thought like, okay, maybe I'll go a little bit more, and then maybe a little bit more, and then just never stopped.
This is an interesting thing as far as like context on all this stuff too, because all of us humans, we always get to wherever we are and then we're just comfortable with it and disgusted with whatever we're doing. But when we were like growing our YouTube channel, we get like 5,000 views on a video, and poor Chris, who's been working on it with me, he's like, oh, we only got 5,000. I'm like, 5,000 humans, which is bigger than my hometown, watched that one stupid video. Whip out the phone, film another one. This is huge. This is enormous. Because we're all used to watching the great big ones, and you're like, no, you don't have to do the great big ones. It's a bunch. 100 people in a room listening to you talk about anything is fantastic.
Yeah, I used to do the same thing. I used to put the number of people in context. Like the first video that got over 100,000 views, I'm like, that's like an enormous college football stadium. Like, what?
Yes. It's bananas.
Yeah.
But we were just like, oh, it's views after like 10 seconds. And you're like, oh, dang it. Now the next one's got to be whatever it is. And you're like, nah, we can slow burn on this for a while, man.
Yep.
You might not be able to answer this one, but what was the source of revenue that allowed you to go full time? Was it sponsorships from YouTube, or was it your actual merchandise and own product sales?
It was sponsorships and ad revenue and stuff had gotten large enough where it could like keep us alive, basically. But it was the like uptick in what I thought was the possibility of on the product side is the reason I went full time. And I knew that by trying to do it part time, I was only going to grow at a certain rate. I knew if I went full time, I would be able to like start changing the curve, or at least that was the bet I made. So when I went full time is when I released the first of the products that I now sell the most of, which are the dust collection chutes that go on miter saws. And that was like the first like aha moment, because as soon as I put that one out, it was popular. People were buying it, but I got so many requests of people saying, hey, I've got this saw. It's got the same problem. Can you do it for this one? I've got this saw. It's got, so I saw the potential there. And I said, if I'm really going to go after this, I have to like focus on it and do it full time. So it was the product side, which is probably the biggest like carrot that I was going towards, at least that had me leave a pretty well-paying, comfortable job as an engineer to go pursue this thing full time.
So when going full time, did that enable you to improve or increase product output, or improve and increase video output? Which was like the primary factor in that full time thing of like, I need to get this time back for me for this part of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's like any side hustle, but especially YouTube. I was spending every night, I'd come home from work, I'd do the stuff with the family and the kids, and then they'd all go to sleep, and then I'd go to work. I just wanted like some of that time back. And I hilariously thought that I would have more free time by doing this full time, but no.
That's a terrible situation.
Just gets filled up with other stuff. Yeah, I thought, okay, if I can accelerate the video, because at the time I was doing 2 videos a month, which, was a pretty good cadence, especially part-time. I thought by going full-time, I'd be able to really accelerate that, which for a while I did, but now I make less videos now than I did when I went full-time. But yeah, it was mostly focusing on like the business side of what I was doing. It was like allowing me to go after, having a bigger installation of printers and manage them and design. It was really the design time. So like for what I do, I have to like reverse engineer basically a miter saw and then develop a product for it and then just do like all this iterative testing on it. So it's kind of time intensive. So I knew that if I wanted to get more products out there, I had to have a lot of time dedicated to that.
With your product development roadmap, do you see your business scaling by adding more products or scaling up and refining existing products? Are you making a really good iPhone, or are you going to make all the Android phones?
Yeah, good question. Well, so the problem with the product I'm going after is they're all really hyper specific to a very specific model of saw. Like if I can come up with the universal dust collection chute, that'd be awesome. You'd see me on a beach right now. Sure. But that's not the case. So I have to use the Pareto rule. I've got to spend 80% of my time on the 20% most important or most used or most requested or, whatever that cross section is of biggest opportunity is what I have to do. So like for me, immediate scale, like we'll call like the 2X scale is to just bring more products online. And then the next one after that is expanding into other areas of the workshop that I think could leverage, a 3D printed product, which I think there's tons. I have a whole notebook full of things I could go after, but the current limiting factor is me and my time, which is a good indication that I should buy back that time and probably find some young engineer that wants to design stuff for me.
That's fair. In the context of choosing what the next product is, where are you finding the information for like the sales per saw or something like that so that you can actually rank and evaluate, okay, this is the next one I need to do? Because yeah, sure, you can start with DeWalt. They sell the most saws of anybody on the planet. But then when you get down to like level 4 or 5, where do you make that decision?
So for a while, I kept track based on email inquiries. So if I get
nice.
I get emails all the time. Hey, do you make one for this? So I kept a spreadsheet. I just kind of kept score based on what people were requesting. That's what really caused me to develop the next 2 after the initial one. And then what I started doing was I started taking the most common requested ones and I'd put them on my site as with a basically call to action to join a notification list. So that way I'm capturing emails of people that I know want to buy the product and I'm getting a real-time score of who wants what. So that kind of drives what I'm developing. So I look at, whatever I have the biggest wait list and I just go after that one next. But yeah, it's there's probably ones that are not on my roadmap that I have just kind of slipped through the cracks. And it's not like I can list every saw on my website and just hope everyone finds it and clicks. So it's not a perfect system, but for me, it's at least an educated guess for what's coming next.
Well, it's way ahead of what most folks do, because most people look at the product and say, by golly, I want this and the whole world's going to be the path to my door. And that's generally not the case.
Yeah, not. And there's certainly been ones I developed, which I thought were going to have a huge want and just weren't. So it goes both ways.
Well, yeah, products are a lot like videos. You hit them most of the time and you might get practiced up and get pretty good after a while, but you're still going to have with it once in a while. So it's with it, going back to videos for a moment, how did you train yourself in video? Let's go back even further. What is your current video production process? How do you go about writing, making a video, planning it out, scheduling, that kind of stuff? And then how did you come about that process?
So I think I've done, probably like 150 videos on YouTube, and the first 120 were terrible. And it was just winging it. It was going out in the garage, setting up a camera, hitting record, trying to think through a sequence of what I was trying to do or what shots I wanted to catch, kind of like narrating along the way, and then getting to the editing, software and just piecing it together. not a great way to make videos, especially now. Like what a lot of people who do YouTube realize, but a lot of people, the majority of people who don't, is that YouTube changes all the time. So when I started making videos in 2017, 2018, I could make a video about how to build a workbench and call the video how to build a workbench, and it would do pretty well. If I did that today, it would be a complete bomb. And it's just the way the algorithm works and sort of the whole science behind it. So like I got lucky in that the method I was using back then was okay enough for it to work. But my process now is I start with a script. And it doesn't mean that I'm reading off a teleprompter for every single video. I do use a teleprompter for some videos. But for the videos that I don't want to be totally 100% scripted, I'll at least bullet point like the points I want to make, or the things I want to make sure I talk about, or the things I want to show, just depending on what the context of the video is. So I start with like at minimum an outline, sort of like in writing form. So I'll actually write it down. Again, going back to the importance of video, like the first 30 seconds of a video is like so crucially important. So I usually plan the first 30 seconds like almost to a T, and then the rest of it may flow more organically or less organically, just depending what it is. So after I write the script, then I kind of walk through like what shots I need to take. If it's like a talking head video where I'm just talking about a topic, those are the easiest to shoot because I can just shoot all the A-roll or talking head parts and then go back and shoot B-roll and then just kind of combine it in the editing process. I joke about this with all of my buddies who are in the same niche, like the whole woodworking DIY niche, is we picked like the worst possible niche to make YouTube videos with because, like we have to actually build something along with making a video. So it takes 5 times longer to build the thing. You have to build it in a way that's actually interesting to watch. You have to intermix it with a story. It's just like, that's why this new like 3D printing venture for me is like awesome. I could just talk about like injection molding.
I was going to say this leads totally into the new channel where you get to talk about the process and setting up a store and all these digital components of it all to where it's handier in a way. That's fair. Was that the impetus for the second channel? Was it not only just the demand for the 3D printing, but the fact that channel was scalable in the format to where it didn't ruin your life by adding it in there?
No, oddly enough, it wasn't. That was like a nice bonus. For a while now, ever since I moved into my commercial space where my print farm now lives, I've always thought that like I'm going to start diluting my main channel with 3D printing content because it's not really what that main audience wants to watch. Like they seem to put up with it and then they get beyond my regular audience and they end up doing pretty well now. But I know that over time, if I just keep pumping out 3D printing stuff, I'm just going to lose my original audience. So I've known for a while I needed to sort of split it up. But really the impetus for the second channel, Print Farm Academy, was one, a place for me to stick all of that 3D printing stuff. But two, it's to basically teach people about the business of 3D printing. So I'm not just another, like you're not going to see me reviewing, every 3D printer that comes out. I'm not going to be doing
you wouldn't get any views.
Do what?
You wouldn't get any views.
Well, yeah. So that's, yes, true. There might be a reviewer or two in there, but that's not like the whole point of the channel, right? It's supposed to be like concrete application stuff for 3D printing, specifically if you want to turn your hobby of 3D printing into a business. And so that paired with the course I'm launching later this year called, Print Farm Academy, same thing, is just like a more in-depth, in-the-weeds version of the type of topics that I'll talk about on that channel. So it was a mix of two things. Like the bonus of the whole thing was that the videos are much easier to make. I'm already like thinking about that stuff like on a daily basis anyways. So like scripting them is a lot easier. I don't feel as forced to like do it. Also with it being a smaller channel, I don't feel like the pressure that the video has to be an absolute banger for me to put it out. That's like one of the downsides of having even a decent sized YouTube channel is that each upload is so important, especially for ad revenue or whatever it is. There's just a lot of there's a lot of things that negatively impact what the videos actually are, unfortunately, rather than what people actually want to see. And 3D printing, the whole 3D printing stuff, for me, at least while it's small, is like a freedom to just put out whatever. If I make a dud, like, oh well, it's a dud.
Well, for the pressure being off, it must be working for you, because I think you've released like 4 videos over there, and like two of them are like over 100,000, and one did like 250,000 already, didn't it?
Yeah.
You're doing okay.
Yeah, it worked out. But again, this goes back, like everything about the launch of that channel was like so planned and strategic. Like I knew for a fact that the one that has all the views was going to be the most viewed one. So when I launched the channel, that was the video that I put out. That's the one that I marketed to my other audience to kind of accelerate everything. So the launch was very strategic. Now from here on out, who knows? But the launch was at least very intentional.
Do talk about that more, because this is effectively a product launch of a YouTube channel. What all did you prep? What was teed up before you did it? Because you didn't upload the video and hope somebody showed up. What were all the back end things that occurred in that?
So the first thing I did was I secured like all the handles on the different platforms. So Instagram, the URL, printfarmacademy.com, all that kind of stuff. I made sure was handled at the get go. But the whole concept of everything about that channel has to do with teaching people how to do a certain thing, and part of that is a course. Like if you want to enjoy just the free stuff on YouTube, have at it. But if you want to go to the next level, that's really where the course comes in. So in developing the course, I was tackling a lot of the subjects that I'll be addressing on the channel. So I was kind of like killing 2 birds with 1 stone a little bit. So as I'm like, making the lesson on identifying your niche. Like I just put out a video on finding your niche. So I took like, a bunch of what I'd already done for the course and sort of put it like a bite-sized version out there on YouTube. Another thing I did is I started the Instagram following like probably a month before the YouTube channel launched. So I got like a little bit of traction. So there's like a tiny bit of like name recognition out there if people have been surfing, 3D printing Instagram type stuff. And then the biggest thing that I would recommend for anybody starting any YouTube channel, especially a second channel, is start with multiple videos. Like most people just think like, I'm going to make a video, I'm going to post it, and it's going to be magical. You have such a better chance of success if you post multiple videos at the same time.
Yes. For the folks who aren't in the YouTube world or something, your click-through rate from one video to the next is almost as heavily weighted as if anybody watched your video at all the way through. Yeah. If they can, it's about time on the platform. Do you get them to stick? And can you get them to stick with your stuff? Right. So that's, hugely important to have multiple good rated quality content around there so that they stay around and prove that you're actually legitimate and not a flash in the pan.
Yep.
Wait a second, I lost my train of thought on that whole thing. You'd think I was a professional, but I'm not. With the production of since your core business is producing these 3D printed dust covers that have enabled ShopStation and the YouTube and that kind of stuff, and YouTube's now leading the charge on those. And YouTube is an exceptionally scalable platform if you have an organic base to move from. The amount of value of a YouTube audience is still wildly underrated by most folks.
Oh yeah.
But for you, as you're building up your product and your core business there, your core monetization channel, you're using a print farm to do it. What are the scaling challenges that you're seeing right now for your farm as you're growing your main business?
It's labor and processes are the 2 big ones. Like the analogy I always use is like, you can fit a certain amount of printers in your arms. Like you can handle, a certain amount. Anybody can. But once you get beyond that, you start introducing problems, compounding problems. So like, that's really, for the past year, that's what I've really been focusing on is like systematizing what I'm doing, creating processes like so that if I hire somebody, they just use this process. It's not all trapped in my head, which is, the totally natural way to start things is to like, just kind of keep track of everything in your head. But that's the barrier to scale, right? You can only get so big by doing that. So like adding systems and then adding employees, and then the way that I add employees, I've made a lot of mistakes along the way about how I'm adding employees, what I tell them, what I don't tell them. I had 2 college guys work for me last year, and up until like the last month they were working for me, they had no idea what we made. No idea. They were just putting stuff in boxes. Never thought that happened. So it made like simple things like, well, yeah, you're supposed to put that in the box because that's what it is. But I never explained to them what it was. So just like, it's people and processes. Those are the 2 biggest things that enable scale or prevent you from scaling.
Yeah. What within those processes around the print farms, from my side, I've always had the issue with consumer printers in that they're not really intended for print farms, and all of us are sticking them on shelves and making it work.
Yep.
What are you seeing as that? What is like the scale barrier of like, oh, I hit 20 machines, now I got to open the door too many times or whatever happens to be on these things. What are you seeing right now within your business? Because you're at the upper end of scale as far as print farms go, of the average of folks for sure. So what in the next step? Where do the printers go mechanically, or where do you need them to go in that kind of thing?
So, as you know, if you're familiar with what I do, I started with all Prusas, which, you know, for the longest time were kind of like the gold standard for taking a consumer machine and making a print farm out of them. They're really reliable. They're just kind of simple, dumb little printers. Even with them being as reliable as they are, I've like run into enough significant repetitive issues that have caused, like, once they get to a certain age, it becomes no longer economical to keep fixing the same things, right? So that was like a mechanical limitation, you know, because to be fair, they weren't made to be print farm machines. Like the ones that Prusa has at their print farm, you know, 600 plus printers, or they're super modified versions of their printer. It's not their printer.
That's kind of a dirty little secret with the whole situation.
Yeah. Like if you look close, they've got like a whole cooling enclosure on the steppers. They've got like, it's a very intentionally made machine to run continuously, because I guarantee they would be just as frustrated as I would by running this many. And it's funny when I reach out to Prusa and explain that, and they're like, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. What are you talking about? I'm like, I have the data.
You asked one of the college kids who was there that summer or whatever it was. He doesn't know how the print farm works.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, I've transitioned more to, as Bamboo Labs started coming online, I started like cautiously entering into that world, because let's face it, they're still a new player out there, right? They have come on the scene.
They could implode tomorrow.
They could go away tomorrow, but also like the longevity of the product has never been tested. May have been tested internally, but that information is certainly not available for everybody. So I started with 3 machines, and I've just been running the screws off them for close to a year now. And they've been holding up like really, really well, especially if I use a Prusa as a baseline, which previously had been sort of like established as a good, solid machine.
The benchmark.
Yeah. So once I saw that data, I started adding more and more, and now I've kind of am transitioning towards all bamboo. One, because the reliability has been proven. There are a couple of things that I'll probably have to get with Bamboo about addressing that are just kind of like nitpicky things. But they're also cheap enough in that if they only lived half as long as a Prusa, like it's still economical to use Bamboo. So I hate to think of them as consumable, but that's almost what they are.
No, that's a real interesting part of the whole print farm model of like, is the machine maintainable or is it consumable and cheap? And this comes up in manufacturing all the time. You can make it repairable or you can make it good. And that's kind of all the situation with these things.
Right.
With that though, so you at this point, you're expecting to effectively buy a whole bunch more printers to keep on going. Within the human factors and the process management of that, is there a scaling component that you see getting away from you? As like, okay, you cross into 100 or 200 machines, what is the hairy monster that you're like concerned about there with structuring that system?
Yeah. I think both fortunately and unfortunately, I haven't encountered that yet, but I will. I think, it's just like for me, it's a power issue. Like wherever I go next.
As in like electrical power?
Yeah. So right now I have I think I have 6 printers running through a little UPS, right? Like at some point, the small UPSs are not going to be a great option. I probably just need to invest in a global UPS for the whole print farm sort of circuits. And then also if I wanted to double my print farm today, it'd be a real problem, because I literally, 1, don't have the place to put them, but 2, I don't have the available power to do so. So wherever I go next, whatever expansion I plan on doing, I have to really think ahead to making sure that I've got power, cooling, all the stuff like air filtration, all the stuff that isn't a problem at the beginning, but when you start putting that many machines in a central area, it starts becoming a real problem. I imagine you guys at Slant probably have already figured that out, but that's got to be like a huge component of what you do if you want to add a ton of machines.
Our building just leaks like a sieve. We solved it when we came in here. You get a rat trap and it's fine. Air filtration. Did that on purpose.
Yeah.
The concentration of the stuff definitely becomes an issue. In our case, the building that we moved into is literally a train factory where we have 50,000 amps of power out there as soon as we want to tap it for whatever we want to do. We can put 5,000 machines in the box if we want to. And that's why we kind of grabbed the building earlier than we thought we ever would. Because it's just like, we're never going to find this unless we build it and stick it next to a dam or something.
Right.
We got lucky in that context that there was this type of facility around to make sure.
And that's the one in Austin?
This is the one in Boise.
In Boise.
The one in Austin will actually be smaller kind of for this reason, because the power to install it is expensive or to find it is hard to find. Though at the same time, there's kind of an experiment on our side. There's kind of an experimentation on it because we treat ourselves much more as like a fulfillment organization. And in that context, having a big, highly concentrated factory isn't necessarily good for fulfillment versus smaller distributed factories, so long as you're maintaining the efficiency within that unit. If you'd asked me in 2020 how we were going to build it, we thought we were going to literally fill out shipping containers with like 50 machines and plunk them into RV parks around the country. And that was how we were going to cover the globe. And literally, COVID hit and we had the demand spikes. And we were like, there is no way we're building a factory for under 500 machines ever. Because there's no way that scales well. But 500 machines is now small for us because, the main one is spec for 3,000 there. But anyhow, with as you're growing with your products, what has printing as the process enabled for you, both in the design of your products and obviously there's all the iteration and stuff at the beginning. Everybody knows about that. That's great. What do you do? You don't have molds. You don't have all that thing. There's a flexibility of the process. But from the engineering standpoint of designing your products, what are the capabilities that you've been able to put in your stuff that you haven't found before?
Specific to what I do, I wouldn't say that there's a lot beyond what you mentioned. I think the biggest value driver for me, like it would be different if I were making like drone parts, because then obviously you can make them lightweight, infill, all that kind of stuff becomes much more valuable. I don't really care about weight. I actually need as much strength as I can get. So infill isn't always a benefit for me in my particular case. But the ability to constantly improve a product, even after it's launched, is so incredibly valuable. And this is what I've heard Joseph Prusa talk about why, because they're certainly big enough. They should be injection molding every one of the parts on their printers, right? But he says it's kind of a core of who we are, whatever. That's a PR answer. But he also says that it's nice being able to like slightly tweak something and then just push it in production and it's already out the door. So I've definitely seen that. Like I've seen things that I've launched, things that I thought were great, and then as soon as it gets in the customer's hands, they're going to, pressure test it in the sense that they're going to put it through all kinds of situations that I never thought of, and they're going to come up and say, "Hey, if it just did this one thing, or if this was moved over just a little bit, well, now I can just do that, and I don't have to, redo this whole mold process and this, complicated, long, arduous thing." So that for me is probably the biggest benefit. At some point, injection molding, at least some of what I do is going to make sense. But it's going to really depend on if it's a true, like, time-tested design of something that I know doesn't need to change, doesn't need to be adapted. But for me, that's one of the, because I get this question all the time. Why don't you just injection mold them? Why don't you, blow mold them? And insert manufacturing process. Why don't you do that? And it's an approachable, quick way to turn out designs and keep iterating on them. Simple.
Yeah. But that's absolutely important, and everybody's on that. But to underscore that a little bit more from the product design standpoint, the philosophy of it, this idea of accepting the fact that your product is flawed when you launch it and accepting and listening to the feedback is so foreign to so many people, not only because we've all been trained of like, you get one shot, the mold's done, and then that's the next 10 years and we're stuck with it.
Right.
But also, again, as engineers, we're just kind of implicitly arrogant and smarter than everybody else, or want to feel like we are most of the time. So a lot of folks have trouble getting over the hump of like, you made a mistake, everybody's whining about the problem with your product. Now you are able to fix it. And it's almost kind of like subconsciously molding gives you the excuse to let it be, whereas printing creates the responsibility to now upgrade it and improve it.
Yeah,
which is better in every sort of way, but counter to what everybody has done and is even kind of psychologically tuned for it, because it's like, I know the customers are wrong, they're using it incorrectly or whatever it happens to be. And this is native all the way through, even in software where people can make stuff and have been changing stuff forever. There's still that arrogance in all these creators' minds to where you should just presume that your product is flawed, and then you're really open to all the feedback when it comes back. And then people love you way more when you're actually changing.
Yeah, you get credibility.
Yeah, huge amount of credit. So what's next? You got the new YouTube channel. You got the products coming out. You've gone full time. What's the vision? Where do you want to go with this whole thing?
Good question. Like for me, YouTube has never been like the thing. That's not really what I'm after. For me, it's a kind of a means to get to where I want to go. I've always been product focused first. So even like at the very early stages of YouTube, like if you really were to ask me, like, do you want to be a YouTuber? Do you want to make videos? My answer would have been no, and it's still no. At some point, I'm not going to be making videos. For me, like I see YouTube as a way to connect with the community, build an audience, all that really important stuff that big companies pay a ton of money for. You essentially do it for you get paid to do it on YouTube, which is sort of like the secret superpower of YouTubers who also sell something, because you're like you're actively cultivating the audience in which you want to monetize. So like YouTube will always be a part of what I do, not because I just want to like sell stuff to my audience, but because of this, like I always think of YouTube as a flywheel. Like it's this giant flywheel that takes a lot of time to get going, but once it's going, it just doesn't take as much effort just to keep it going. So like for me, because it's less effort to keep it going, it's really no brainer to keep it going. But for me, like products is where I want to go. Products is like, I like solving problems. I like the whole manufacturing thing. I enjoy that piece of it. So like, if I'm really honest with myself, I like look out 5 years, that's a big piece of what I want to be doing. And the content, like I want to get to a place where I'm making content that has no financial implications. So kind of like the new YouTube channel, if I make a dud, I make a dud, that's fine. I don't have that luxury yet, especially on the Shop Nation, the main channel. But at some point, I hope to. If I want to make a video about something that's totally off topic that I'm interested in and I think might be interesting to other people, but it turns out I'm wrong, oh well, it's kind of where I want to go.
What are the type of products that you want to move into?
So like, probably
you're going to do dust collectors for the next 20 years or want to do something else?
I could. No, it's going to be, it'll definitely be like one of the things I think about is for people to get into a business, whether you're selling something or you're doing content about something, it has to be like core to you. Like there has to be some component that has to do with you, right? You have to be connected to it. So I have always enjoyed making things and creating things and working in a shop and just building stuff. So the products that I go after are probably going to be tailored towards that market. But I have other interests. Like today, I played golf. I love playing golf. Maybe I move towards something golf related. I love 3D printing. Maybe there's something 3D printing related. Like it's going to be tertiary to something that I enjoy. But if I'm going to guess, if I'm going to wager what that looks like what specific products I go after in a couple of years, it's probably going to be shop focused, just because I see, like I've spent enough time in the space. I've gotten enough feedback from people to know what the issues are and where the opportunities lie. And I think I've grown a network big enough where I can immediately utilize that versus having to build up a golf following or something like that, right?
For sure. Oh, within like model and that kind of stuff, obviously right now you're all direct consumer. Are you, as you move into golf and that kind of stuff, are you looking at other means of distribution? So like taking some of these things and putting them in retail or putting them in Ace Hardware and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's always been like my goal. Like I want to one day be able to walk into Lowe's and point at something and say, that's mine. Yeah. That's been a goal I have circled for a long time. Nice. And it's not going to be anytime soon, but yeah, that's the level and scale that I want to get to.
Sweet. Well, that just about does it. Anything else for the folks?
I think that's it. If you want to know more about woodworking, check out Shop Nation. If you want to learn about starting a 3D printing business, check out Printform Academy.
Excellent videos. Travis does an awesome job on all of those things.
Thanks, Gabe.
Hope you guys enjoyed that conversation. We're going to try to do more of these interviews, but we're looking for folks who are really subject matter experts around manufacturing, and business and content creation and that kind of thing, the things that we do, so that it's actually useful for you guys to see the conversation and new and different. We don't really want to talk about like the 3D printing industry in and of itself. We want to talk about what it enables, what kind of products can be made. So make any recommendations down below of anything, any folks that you think we should talk to, and quite frankly, go tweet at them and tell them to come on. Right now, I have an open invitation to the guys over at Micronics to come on, because I'd love to talk to them about the creation of their machine over the last few years. And then we're working on bringing on a few other people from around YouTube who you may or may not know. And of course, if you haven't already watched one of these before, go ahead and you can check out our Paul Powers interview from a couple months ago, which was also pretty darn good. And we got to talk about 3D models and that kind of stuff. But other than that, have a great day, everybody.